Yeah.
Okay, we're all in.
Okay. Okay. Thank you everyone for joining. We're going to start in just a minute. Just let a few more people join and then we'll get started. Okay, everyone, I think we'll get started. The borough president may be late. She has a few other obligations today, so we'll just get started without her. But we are, thank you everyone for joining us on our Tuesday task force. We are, we talk about both vaccine and how that's going, and then also issues related to New York City and reopening. And so we're very excited today that the Department of Transportation has agreed to come and talk to us about the open restaurants program, sort of where they are with the design and planning of it and how it's moving forward. And I know that's a topic that a lot of people are interested in. So without any further ado, I thank you. I think we have Jennifer and Emily, Jennifer St. Ines from the Department of Transportation, who maybe you can just sort of take it away and start telling us about the program.
Excellent. Thanks, Jessica.
For coming, Jennifer.
Of course. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jennifer St. Ines. I'm the DOT Manhattan Deputy Borough Commissioner. Happy holidays. As many of you are aware, the Departments of Transportation and City Planning have kicked off our public engagement process to develop the design guidelines for permanent open restaurants. And this process will consist of a few in-person and remote roundtables that will take place over the next several months while we develop the draft guidelines for spring of next year. And so today we're looking to share with you an overview of the process, the goals, and our timeline, as well as upcoming opportunities to provide feedback during public events, as well as an online survey. I'm joined today by a number of my DOT colleagues, as well as Emily Weidenhoff, who is DOT's Director of Public Space, and she'll be walking us through the presentation. So I think with that, I'll go ahead and hand it off to Emily to screen share and pull up our deck. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Jennifer. And thanks everyone for having us this afternoon. I'm also joined by my colleague, Eric Gregory at the Department of City Planning, who's actually going to kick us off. So please go ahead, Eric.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having us today. And we can just dive right in. My name is Eric Gregory. I'm the Chief Urban Designer at the Department of City Planning, working alongside our partners at the DOT. There's a few other colleagues from our side as well that can help answer any questions you may have. Next slide. So this is a pretty brief presentation. We want to make sure we spend most of our time hearing any comments and feedback that you may have. But we want to give a quick program update overall. And then I'll pass it back over to Emily to kind of talk through more specifically our design goals, and also what we've got teed up for engagement, and then kind of sharing some next steps. Next slide. Many of you have probably been a part of this conversation and effort to date. This has been going through a variety of different public components. Most notably, what's shown here is the public review process, which was really firstly centered around the text amendment, which passed the City Planning Commission on November 15th. That is currently at the City Council. We are awaiting a time scheduled with them to walk through that in more detail and discuss it further. Looking like that's expected in early 2022. But most importantly, why we're here today is really to focus in on the design engagement process, which Jennifer kind of alluded to. There's a variety of different things that we've already gotten started, most notably a public survey launch, which we'll talk about in a minute. But really, this is meant to be a months-long process by which we really take all the things that we've been learning along this public review process, both the good and the bad, and really looking at how we can learn from those that feedback and how it's incorporated into the future design of the program, both for sidewalks and the roadway. We anticipate this initial design process to be to continue through the spring with draft design guidelines in March that we feel will be a good way to have a snapshot in time of what the rulemaking process will then pick up and take in the spring and summer of next year. And with the goal of this being a program that could be have a good foundation to be up and running as we transition into 2023. And while we're highlighting today specific the next few months, but just know that this engagement process will continue as it has already over the past several months to ensure that we're getting feedback from all those that want to provide it. Next slide. And for those of you that maybe haven't attended some of these sessions as it's gone through public review, just to give a quick overview on the permanent open restaurants program itself is will be overseen and administered by DOT for both the sidewalk and roadway. One of the things that we think has been a positive is that this has been something that's been available citywide, which is something we want to continue to do as we move forward with the permanent program development. And we know that there needs to be much more robust and fine-tuned sidewalk clear path and roadway siting criteria, along with a host of design improvements that really help to tackle some of the quality of life concerns that we've heard from folks. And also just build off of what some of the positives have been, because there have been many on that front as well. While DOT is the main agency kind of shepherding this effort going forward, it's not to say that it isn't without the help of a variety of other city agencies, a couple of which here, which provide a specific role, whether that be the NYPD enforcing noise, our colleagues at sanitation being responsible for garbage removal, and our at Department of Health and enforcing food safety rules. So, these agencies, while this is an exhaustive list, many others, DEP, all those agencies will still continue to be a part of this city family of agencies to ensure that this program continues on to be successfully. With that, I'll hand it over now to Emily, who will speak more specifically to the design guidelines, goals, and processes.
Thanks so much, Eric. So again, thanks to so many of you who have contributed a lot of ongoing feedback about the emergency program over the past many months. We're very excited to kind of be at this moment and be able to look towards the future and move beyond a temporary emergency program and craft a permanent program that will be more responsive and balance the needs of communities while still allowing the kind of vibrancy that outdoor dining brings to our streetscapes. So based on, again, all the feedback from community boards citywide, as well as feedback from the restaurant industry, along with all of our sister agencies who have touch points across this entire program. We're kicking off this design guideline process with the following goals. First, accessibility, making sure that the roadway setups are accessible to all users, but also that our sidewalks are accessible to all users. There's a lot of demand for our street and sidewalk space. So making sure that there really is a balance and accessibility is at the front. Same with safety. Safety for DOT is our highest concern. And so making sure that dining setups, particularly in the roadway, allow for emergency access onto streets, but also that emergency access is provided to buildings and all the properties on the block. and making sure that the dining setups themselves are robust and visible, and allow for really critical sight lines, both for drivers to be able to see critical road signage, but also for drivers, pedestrians, and cyclists to all be able to make eye contact with each other and maintain that really critical visibility of road users. Next, flexibility is going to be key in the permanent program, really promoting coordination of these setups with all the myriad activities that you all know take place on our streets and sidewalks every day and keep this city working and moving. And that ranges from emergency utility work to all of the critical transportation planning that we do here at DOT, bus lanes, bike lanes, neighborhood delivery zones, commercial meter parking, making sure that there's really a balance and thoughtfulness to all the different aspects that need to happen on our right of way, as well as maintenance and sanitation, critical to keeping our streets and sidewalks fully functioning for all users. Next is equity. As Eric said, a huge success of the emergency program has been access across all 5 boroughs, and letting restaurants of kind of any size and scale have the ability to participate. And so as we look at design guidelines in the future, we do want to make sure that there are inclusive parameters so that all restaurants citywide have the opportunity to participate. But lastly, as we've heard from other boroughs, appearance and neighborhood context is going to be critical to establish clear guidelines that can move us beyond the kind of plywood city that we have on our streets now, and really promote clean, attractive, and well-maintained setups, and focus on enhancing the kind of local character and neighborhood context throughout the many neighborhoods of this huge city. So we are here today to ask for your help in engaging all of your stakeholders to help participate and give us feedback in this process, and share with you some tools and next steps to do so. I want to reiterate that as part of this process, we are in ongoing regular coordination meetings with all of our sister agencies, and that includes everyone from sanitation and Department of Environmental Protection to NYPD, fire department, along with the Mayor's Office of People with Disabilities, with Small Business Services, with Department of Health, just to name a few. A really large group. Again, Open Restaurants has really touched so much of the enforcement, operations, and priorities of so many city agencies. And so we want to make sure that we are really incorporating all of their feedback into the program moving forward. We are also partnering and collaborating with Alfresco NYC, which is a coalition that is bringing together groups of industry professionals, folks from the Hospitality Alliance, to design professionals, to transportation and accessibility advocates. Alfresco NYC is going to be leading a series of virtual roundtable discussions to really solicit best practices, high-level principles for a program in the future. And that is feedback and input that we will be sharing publicly as we develop that schedule with them. The next bits are for yourselves and all of your stakeholders. First, we have a public survey that's online. It will be open through the end of January. We have over 6,000 responses already, but highly encourage you and your colleagues to submit your responses and give us some high-level input on the Open Restaurant program overall. nyc.gov/open restaurants is the main access point for all updates and relevant program information. So please check in there regularly. Eric will post a link to the survey in the chat, but again, you can find that on our website. We also have a one-page brochure that features a link to the survey, but is also just a really good, kind of very simple set of visuals and language to help share the vision of a permanent open restaurant program. So you can download the PDF, you can also print it out and share it with all of your stakeholders to really help clarify the message and the vision for how to make a solid, thriving, and kind of well-balanced outdoor dining program for the future. And then lastly, we are going to be hosting some virtual public roundtables in January. Both DOT and DCP will be presenting a little bit more detail on our goals and the different aspects of the design guidelines and soliciting feedback from the public. So this is a really important moment to have community boards or constituents, residents attend and give us really detailed feedback. So here is where we are in the process. We're visiting all of the boroughs, either their borough board meeting or their service cabinet meetings. The virtual roundtables that I mentioned will be on Tuesday and Wednesday, January 11th and 12th, both midday and in the evening. More details and links will be posted on our website, and that's something also we will follow up with you and make sure you have all of that information. And then the goal is to take all this feedback that we hear and incorporate it into a draft set of design guidelines that we will share with you in March of next year. The goal is to create something that is easily digestible, easy to read, has a very strong and simple graphic quality to be able to share and explain all these different design guidelines. At that point, we'll then come back to all of the boroughs as well as host another round of public workshops to solicit further feedback on these draft design guidelines and ultimately issue an updated guideline release later in the spring, summer. And then of course, all of this is kind of overlaid on the CAPA rule process, which will kick off late summer or late spring and run through the summer and fall of next year. The goal here is to come out in 2022 with a clear set of guidelines that are predictable so that restaurants know the future program in 2023 that they can plan, and that ultimately there is a much more coordinated and higher level of review before any permanent elements permanent program elements go on the ground in 2023. So again, a lot more kind of thoughtful guidelines and planning for the 2023 program rollout. And with that, thank you so much. We will turn it over to all of you for your questions and feedback.
Terrific. Thank you so much, the team at DOT and city planning. And again, we really appreciate you coming. Just so you know, the DOT and the team will be presenting at our borough service cabinet, but since those meetings aren't generally open to the general public, we wanted to have the space as well for people to hear about the plan and comment and ask questions. People have a lot of questions already, and there are a few raised hands. So I again want to just, the borough president really asked DOT to come to this meeting and city planning. And so we're very appreciative that you did. And I'm happy now to open it up and hear various questions. I think Liz Ritter, you were the first, I saw your hand raised.
Thank you so much, Jessica. I appreciate it. This was a really informative presentation, and thank you very much for those of you who gave it and for those of you who made sure that we had access to it. I have two questions. One relates to this idea of outdoor dining. I don't really understand it because as soon as you have enclosed sheds in the street and on sidewalks, given how enclosed they are, it's really indoor dining. So I would love to see more clarity on what is outdoor dining, what is indoor dining, to the extent that rules on vaccination, masking, proof of whatever are different for outdoor versus indoor dining. How is a fully enclosed shed that's on a sidewalk really different from indoor dining? So that's one question. And the other question, I'm going to see if this is going to work. I'm actually at home right now, and I'm going to turn my camera around so that you can see my reality. So here we have, you know what? I can't do it. Can you see the street view? There's the restaurant shed across the street from me. There is my very, very narrow street. And I know I speak for everybody who lives in a situation like this, that when someone is double parking, or frankly, the street is so narrow, even when no one is double parking, if something like, I don't know, a fire engine, an ambulance, an oil delivery truck, Fresh Direct, tries to get through, they can't. So it's a little bit of a public health problem. It's certainly a noise problem. Help a sister out. This is happening all over the city.
Okay, thanks, Liz. Anyone from DOT or city planning want to take that?
Sure. I'll just say really quickly, we coordinate our the open restaurant program guidelines with the Department of Health and with the state guidance on the health requirements. So if there are certain instances of dining structures and in kind of full enclosures, that's something that we can speak to you in greater detail offline. Exactly what you bring up about the narrow street and the kind of balance of users with a kind of full scale shed is absolutely what we are looking to kind of move the bar on in our permanent design guidelines and get to something that feels much more balanced. And ultimately that gets to our flexibility principle. It's very difficult to move a building in the roadway. So that's a really great feedback and definitely things we'll be thinking about.
Okay, thanks. As we move on, if we can, I know a lot of people have comments and strong opinions, and definitely we need to take advantage of the survey and the roundtables, but if possible, if you could just stick to a question for the group, that'd be terrific. I think Suzanne, Aaron, you're the next with your hand up.
Yeah, sorry, actually I wanted to provide feedback more than questions, but I'll be very quick. I'm from CB2, and so is Valerie De La Rosa, who chairs our reopening working group, and Shirley Secunda, who chairs our traffic and transportation group. We're all on this call. You mentioned about receiving our input, and we're very excited about that. And also thank you for this presentation, which has a lot of really interesting information. But of course, our concern is that maybe none of our input will be heard or heeded. We've had a lot of meetings on this subject, and we have a lot of concerns about it. We have the highest number of SLA licenses in the city, as well as the highest number of open restaurants in the city. So we have a very intense experience with this program, and we were very supportive of the emergency program, but we have grave concerns about the permanent program. I'm just responding to some of the things that were in your presentation. Noise, the NYPD does not satisfactorily monitor noise in this district as it is. So I don't know how that's going to change. Filth, rodents, we have rats going like crazy. I have 4 of them in my tree pit. And then some things that we are concerned may not be able to be resolved through design. We're concerned about the impact on rent prices, because with additional revenue generating space, obviously that's going to be a profit that landlords will share in. So it's going to make restaurants be able to outbid many other forms of retail. We worry about that, and we worry about the inequity of that. We also worry about the inequity of the fact that not every restaurant will have access to an open restaurant, and that means that they will be at a disadvantage and their business will be at a disadvantage. So if equity is one of your design concerns, I'd be gravely concerned about ways in which building it differently or building it one way or another is not really going to address certain equity concerns. The impact on competing businesses, I've said, and then Parking is another thing that has not been measured satisfactorily in any of the work that's been done. And we need to see the cumulative impact of loss of parking after City Bike and open restaurants, and how many, we have such a high concentration of all of this that we feel the impact strongly. We have a very strong lack of confidence in the ability to enforce this, and the feeling that one size fits all, that one design plan will work for the entire city does not feel right to us, given our physical makeup, as a landmark district and with small streets, and with already a grave intensity of restaurants and liquor licenses. Thank you very much for hearing me.
Thank you, Susanna. Again, we have a lot of hands up, and I know there is a lot of opportunity for input. If you can stick to a question, that'd be great, because folks from DOT and city planning are here to answer. So we know that you have a lot of feedback, but if you could stick to a question, that'd be great. The next hand up, I believe, was Alita Camp.
Thank you. I have a few questions. One is, you mentioned that all kinds of restaurants will be given an opportunity, but I'd like to know how that works when a restaurant is sited in front of a bus stop or a bike stop, a city bike station or a fire hydrant. Second of all, noise, as someone else mentioned, I saw a live guitar player outside a restaurant. I don't think that that's permitted, but there seems to be no enforcement. Third, I understand that the FDNY believes that propane heaters are dangerous, yet I understand there's some bill pending to permit propane heaters, and I'd like to know what the position is on that. And then finally, last, will there be more opportunities for public roundtables? Because 2 public roundtables with only an hour and a half each just doesn't seem long enough. You don't have to answer all of those. I'm just raising them. Thank you.
Thanks, Lita.
Thanks, Jessica.
Okay. Anyone from
Thanks.
DOT want to
just very quickly, propane heaters are currently not permitted, and I don't know if anyone else from DOT, I'm not familiar with the details of the legislation, so I don't know if anyone else wants to jump in on that. There will definitely be more public roundtables after we release a draft for everyone to actually see in much more detail and be able to comment very specifically. I think both to your points and the points previously, we understand there are enforcement is a huge bucket of the permanent restaurant program, and that's absolutely something that DOT and our city colleagues are going to work to develop. This immediate next phase is very focused on the physical design guidelines, which is just one piece of developing the much larger permanent program. And so that will happen over the course of next year.
All right, thanks. Thank you again. If you can stick to maybe just one question and try not to repeat a question that's already been asked. Michelle Birnbaum, you're next. Michelle?
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you for the presentation. A couple of questions here, a couple of comments. One, I see that we are all going to try very hard to mitigate all of the concerns that everyone has in a program that probably should have been thought out a little more clearly before it was, in my mind, pushed through. So I'm very concerned about all of it. Since you acknowledge, as everybody does, that enforcement is going to be the primary concern here, how will you deal with that? You have to create a much larger enforcement force in the DOT, in the DOH, MH, in the DSNY. You can't possibly work with the amount of agents that you have now, and each of these city organizations are going to have a substantial increase in staffing. So number one, to my mind, that should have been the first consideration before you even go to design, as to whether or not you have staff and capability to increase the amount of staffing that will be necessary for this program. My second question is, what about fees? Number one, are there going to be fees for these cafes? And my last question is, how will you deal with the potential problem that renting storefronts will have by restaurants. And what I mean is this: if a restaurant knows that it has an additional 200, 300 square feet on the street, will they tend to rent less square footage on the interior? Most of these people are business people. They've done their own research. They've done their own demographics. They know what they need to have a viable business. They chose a location for that reason. Now it seems this program really didn't trust that judgment and trust the fact that they could get back, that when things get back to normal, that they could get back to having a normal, thriving business. So now you might have encouraged them to, in fact, rent less space. Has that been a consideration? So those three things: enforcement, potential fees, and consideration on the effect on the restaurant rental market. Thank you.
Hi, this is Julie Shipper from DOT. Emily, I'm happy to take some of these. On your first question about enforcement, DOT is staffing up. We will have a full enforcement team that is just dedicated to open restaurants, that is in the process of being hired now. On fees, there will be fees dedicated to this program, both for the roadway and the sidewalk. Those fees are currently being determined and will go into the rulemaking in the spring and summer when we are put in all the rules for this program. And your last question, we are doing some economic studies right now that will also help enforce the, or help lead us to the fees, and we'll also look at some of the economic impacts that we think will come from this program.
Okay, thank you, Julie. Trevor, next, stick to questions if you can. Trevor?
Yeah, sorry, I was just trying to unmute myself. I'll be quick, understanding that there's lots of folks. My impression is that there's absolutely no enforcement going on at the moment. I mean, anyone who's seen these streets, there's no enforcement. And I'm curious, because this will be in effect for at least a year and a half, maybe two. Why isn't DOT and the appropriate agencies just doing enforcement right now to prove that they can do it? Because there's nothing going on right now. Two other questions, which are more technical, is that will the grading for restaurants include the outdoor sheds? And on a particular street near me, a couple of places which are not restaurants have also set up outdoor sheds. And I'm wondering if you're seeing that in the rest of the city, and what is the process or procedure for that if they're also building sheds for businesses?
Thanks, Trevor. Anyone from DOT? Planning?
Trevor, on the enforcement issue, we are certainly, we are enforcing. However, we know that, you know, this was put up very quickly during the emergency program, and we have been, you know, lighter on enforcement than we will be in the permanent program. Rules will be very clearly defined. There will be a full enforcement team. And if there are outdoor structures that you're seeing that are not for restaurants, you can send that to our Manhattan Borough Commissioner's office, and we can let our inspectors know, and they can go out and take a look.
Mm-hmm.
Grading issue?
Sorry, what I missed that one.
Restaurant grading will include the shed structures.
That is something that we are looking at in our design guidelines, and will be included in that.
Okay, thank you. Next, I think I saw the next was Katie Bordenaro.
No, it was Shirley Secunda.
Okay, I was trying to go in order, but Shirley, go ahead. If you want to take it away, go ahead.
Well, yeah, I actually, my questions have already somewhat been asked about fee structure and enforcement, but I just wanted a little more information about it. About enforcement. Emily, do you have any knowledge right now about how many people will be in the DOT enforcement force, and any plan on how to conduct that enforcement? Could you elaborate a little on that?
Okay, thank you, Shirley. Anybody have an answer on that?
We are beginning the hiring process now and working with OMB to continue staffing up. When we have more information on exact numbers, we can give that to you as well.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay.
And the second is fee. So DOT is setting up the fee structure. Is that correct?
DOT is working with OMB to set up that fee structure.
OMB on the fee structure, right. And has anybody talked about market rate fees? This would be to the restaurants, right? Somebody had brought that up at a CB2 meeting, and I was just curious about that.
We are doing an economic study on this and also working very closely with OMB. I am not certain on that, but can get back to you on it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Katie, again, if you pick one or two questions and then.
Sorry, real quick, this is Eric.
Go ahead, Eric, go ahead.
I just, there was a question earlier about DOH&H enforcement, and I just wanted to share that they do cover outside inspection, and their grade covers the full restaurant. We're working with them to make sure that the design reflects best practices, and especially thinking about vermins and trash. So that's definitely on our radar to look into further and include in the permanent program. And then also there was a couple comments about the survey in the chat. Just to say that the survey is really meant to be a way to get qualitative feedback from the public. It's not to kind of count numbers. We think this, along with all the other outreach that we're trying to do, is really to engage with as many New Yorkers as possible and ensure that their input is really going into our thinking to make the design guidelines reflect that thinking. And that, as Emily alluded to earlier, there will be opportunities once those draft design guidelines are released to further comment and input on them. So this is a continued.
Sorry, you muted, Eric. Eric, we missed the end of what you said.
Did I?
You're saying this is an ongoing process?
Yes, just an ongoing process with respect to design guidelines, and that there will be continued input as we go. We're highlighting some of the immediate next steps, but just as Emily spoke to earlier, that this will continue on well into 2022.
Okay, thank you, Eric. Katie, your next questions only. That
I am. Can you hear me now? Yes, great.
Yep.
Katie Bordenaro, Community Board 2. I sit on our SLA committee, so this is a very live issue every month for us. But one of the things that I've noticed that has not been taken into account at all is that if the building in front of which the roadbed dining is sitting has to put up scaffolding, then the sidewalk becomes a mess. And I don't know how you can't always access the roadbed dining from the restaurant anymore. We've seen that in a couple of applications already. So what's going to be done when scaffolding is put up and impedes access to this roadbed dining?
Okay, thank you. Anyone want to take that?
Great question. The Department of Buildings is part of our interagency regular coordination meetings, and we'll be working with them to really chart out the details for scaffolding as well as other types of construction, fencing and things like that.
All right, thank you. Robert.
Thank you.
Robert Espierre, go ahead. Good question.
Yeah, thank you. I may have to repeat this question for the next agency, but does DOT have, I'm hearing someone else.
Yeah, if everyone can mute, please, that'd be great.
I wonder if DOT can talk a bit about what financing support that will be available for construction and retrofitting. A lot of these structures are really elaborate, but yet may be non-compliant. So retrofitting is an issue and a costly issue. So is there a financing plan for this?
Thank you, Robert.
So that's a really great point, and something that our colleagues both at the Department of Small Business Services as well as the Economic Development Corporation have raised. And that's really some of our thinking in the equity bucket of the design guidelines, is how we ensure that we can again make sure that there are cost-effective options for transitioning into the permanent program.
Great.
Thank you. Christine Berthet, next.
Yes, thank you for the presentation. My first question is, will the street installation be permitted in the sidewalk extensions and enlargements? Obviously, as the city has designated those areas for absorbing more pedestrians, we hope that they are not going to be now dedicated to outdoor dining. The second question is, will the trees and all the other paraphernalia of furniture that found its way on the sidewalk will be counted as obstructions in order to do the calculation for the 8 or 12 feet? And finally, just want to remind you that enclosed Sidewalk Cafe were really very, very limited, but now it seems that the sidewalk installation are getting enclosed, which as a result is essentially becoming an enclosed sidewalk cafe. And I hope that will be forbidden.
Thank you, Christine. Anyone want to take those? DOT, city planning?
Yeah, so those are all incredibly important points and things, we care a lot about. I think one of the great aspects of both developing design guidelines, but then also managing the permanent program is that we will have a team at DOT that is dedicated to reviewing open restaurant applications, and also the ability to think about the cumulative effect of open restaurant applicants on a corridor in a district. And so we'll be able to think about and plan around some of these larger transportation, pedestrian demand, things like that. Eric, I don't know if you want to speak to the enclosed sidewalk cafe piece.
It's something that you're right in that they were very limited in nature previously, with not that many that existed, and those are much more robust and reviewed by DOB, where clearly I think moving forward into a world in the permanent program where they are much less substantial than what we're seeing in temporary and movable in nature, and certainly not on our sidewalks. So I know that that's something that happens in a lot of neighborhoods where there's built structures on the sidewalks now, and that is clearly not, in many of those cases, it's not legal in the emergency program, and it won't be legal going forward.
Okay, thank you, Eric. Emma Colbert, a question that hasn't already been asked. Emma? You are muted.
Sorry, I had to unmute myself. Sorry, I'm doing other things. So one of my big concerns is the fact that the Smoke-Free Air Act has not been addressed at all in any of this, and the fact that our homes are filling up with smoke from the restaurants on the sidewalk. I mean, it was bad enough before open restaurants, and now it's really a disaster. I have an asthmatic, 11-year-old, and my house fills up with both marijuana smoke and pot smoke. So that hasn't been addressed. And the other thing that I'm truly horrified at is I've been at each one of the presentations that have been open to the public. And I run a Lower East Side Block Association. I'm the president of it. And I never hear there being any addressing of how this is going to work with the residents who are living really in and amongst this program. There seems to be zero concern. And finally, my last comment is the fact that we're talking about the DOT enforcing this, when I have witnessed in my neighborhood the absolute lack of enforcement with the inner city buses, which is turned into the largest form of transportation, interstate transportation within our country. I'm horrified to think of how they're going to manage this. Thank you.
Anybody from DOT want to respond?
Yeah, so thank you so much for bringing up the smoke. That is something that the Department of Health has raised with us also. So, as things develop, we'll keep you posted. That's a very, very important point. Julie, I don't know if you want to speak any more to enforcement.
I don't know if we lost Julie. Okay.
Julie had to hop off, but for the current, any current enforcement issues, please continue to reach out to our office. Jen Leung, Colleen Chattergoon, La Blackwood, as well as myself and Borough Commissioner Pankart, we can help address that.
Thanks, Jennifer.
And also just to clarify, there will still be aspects of outdoor dining that will be enforced by the Department of Health as well as NYPD. So yeah, we'll continue.
Great, thanks, Emily. Val Jones, question?
Yes, I'm not sure if you answered mine, but I have two. Will Department of Health define open restaurants based on a health model? And will Department of Health do public messaging so that people understand what exactly is an open restaurant from a health perspective? And the reason I ask that is I'm reading something by Sanjay Gupta that says the virus may mutate down a notch or two to become less virulent and deadly, but its presence will nevertheless probably be perpetual. So I'm glad to hear that you're doing something about open restaurants, but that's my two questions. Are they going to define it? Are they going to do public messaging so that people can contact them when it doesn't meet what would be a healthy situation? Like, as someone said before, where you actually have an indoor restaurant outside, you have something enclosed so that air is not circulating. So it's really not a healthy place to be.
Thanks, Val. Anybody?
Yeah, so the Department of Health does have guidelines for all operating restaurants and checklists, as well as associated inspection teams. They have guidance up on their website, and we'll continue to coordinate with them to clarify some of these issues as kind of circumstances may change around the virus. But again, if there is a specific concern about a setup that you feel is not responding to Department of Health's guidelines, please reach out to the Manhattan Borough Commissioner's office, and we will coordinate an appropriate inspection.
Wait, the Manhattan Borough Commissioner of what?
DOT.
Oh, DOT. Okay, thank you.
All right,
I think that should be like stated so that everybody knows, because I think we see these outdoor restaurants that are basically indoor structures, and I don't know that people know that they can call somebody and say this is not a healthy looking structure. Thank you.
Thanks, Val. Irena, question?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Emily and Eric and Jennifer, for the presentation, and thank you to your colleague who jumped off. Sorry, my camera's not on. I'm in the office. I just want to make one brief comment, and that is I was in New York City during the surge, and it was my understanding that the purpose of the outdoor dining was so that because we didn't have a vaccine, we couldn't sit indoors to eat. So we sat outdoors, we put on our coats, our hats, our gloves to keep our neighborhood restaurants going. Now we have a vaccine. I really don't understand the need for any of these structures to exist at this point. We can just go back into the restaurants and have a meal. And if we want to extend the Sidewalk Cafe program unenclosed, I think we should do that. Many speakers on this call have talked about the enclosures. If you walk up and down the Upper West Side, and by the way, I'm speaking as a resident, not as a member of Community Board 7, which I am, many, if not most, of these street structures are enclosed with doors and windows, and they're basically out. The owners have basically increased their square footage to create a second restaurant on the public street, and it's an outrage. So I hope as we continue to review this program and come up with guidelines, standards, uniformity, that we tell all of these owners to unenclose these restaurants. We don't need them anymore. We have a vaccine. We don't need any more enclosed cafes. Everything should be unenclosed. My question is, How is DOT and the other relevant agencies going to deal with two specific points? One is that bars that don't really have a very robust menu have also decided that they want enclosed structures in the street. Bodega on Columbus Avenue has taken their outdoor space is larger than their indoor space because the storefronts on either side of them are not restaurants. And for some reason, these store owners have basically given them permission to build an enclosed structure basically across the entire avenue on Columbus Avenue. That is an outrage. And I hope when DOT evaluates this program that businesses are not allowed to extend beyond their storefront and take up an inordinate amount of space that they don't, that's not parallel to their store, to their restaurant. And the other issue, and this has come up, this has been an ongoing problem, and I used to be assistant district manager of Community Board 7 in the 80s. And that is that when the enclosed cafes, when the owners walked away, those structures sat there on the sidewalk and became graffiti strewn, littered, attracted roaches and other vermin. And now what's happening is when the restaurants pull out or when they're closed for an inordinate amount of time, the structures are just sitting there empty. And so I hope that as part of DOT and all of the other agencies' evaluation of this program, that we don't have empty structures sitting on the streets when stores have already closed. Thank you.
All right, anyone from DOT want to tackle closed restaurants or size? Anybody on the call?
I will just say super quickly, thank you, all really important points. We agree with you that kind of large scale structures do not yield a flexible streetscape. So we will definitely be thinking about kind of lighter touch elements for the design guidelines.
By the way, there's a large life-size fiberglass moose sitting on top of Spaghetti Tavern on the Upper West Side. And we are lucky that to date, the wind like downtown at Odeon hasn't been severe enough that has not fallen on someone. No one should be allowed to put anything on top of a shed.
Thanks, Serena. We're going to keep moving. We have a lot of hands up, so if we can just stick to a question, that'd be great. Thanks, Bob. Gormley, you're next.
Thanks, Jessica. Actually, my question is for you, Jessica. It's maybe it's better classified as a clarification. You mentioned earlier that DOT and city planning are coming to Borough Service Cabinet meeting, which is on Friday, December 17th. On its website, DOT identifies that meeting as a Borough Board meeting. Reason I'm asking it is I got 2 calls yesterday. Borough Board is open to the public, Borough Service is not. So what's the deal there?
Right, that's the reason for this call today, is because the meeting is actually a Borough Service Cabinet meeting, which is not open to the public. And because there had already been a discussion at Borough Board when the vote, the next presentations at Borough Service Cabinet, not open to the public. So that's why DOT agreed very nicely to come here today to the task force, which is of course open to everybody.
I got it. Okay, thank you.
Sure. Valerie De La Rosa, question?
Yes. Hi, I'm Valerie De La Rosa. I am the second vice chair of CB2 and leading the board's open restaurants efforts. Jessica, thank you so much for this forum. Emily, Jennifer, and Julie, I wanted to ask you what comments you have on the roadway structure roof that was briefly mentioned in Tribeca that came off. What was your comment? Any comments on that? And then would like to know if DOT has hired the director of open restaurants, a role that has been open for a few months. If you could give us an update on that. Thanks.
Sure. So our press team is officially responding to the Odeon roof that blew over. So please stay tuned for that. See you. that in public media. And then we should be, we are moving forward with the director of open restaurants, and we'll hopefully be able to announce next steps about that team soon.
Okay, thank you. Todd Shapiro, a question?
Yes, hi. My name is Todd Shapiro. I serve on CB5's Public Safety Quality of Life Committee. And again, I would like to thank the Department of Transportation for making this presentation. I don't want to repeat any of the questions. A lot of the issues as to sound, noise, hygiene, and so on, we share those concerns on CB5, and I hope they will be addressed. My concern, I've actually been on the PSQL committee for 5 years, is, how is DOT in its design process and how it's going to be managing this permanent program going to deal with the specifically local issues of where, on a long-term basis, all of these structures are going to be located? Because a big part of our review process, and in CB5, we've got as many, if not more, establishments than any other part of the city. For example, the foot traffic and, keeping track of, where these things are. I mean, I understand that as an emergency measure, when we saw these things come up and we supported it, they just went up everywhere. But as part of the past review process, we were very careful to sound out the local neighborhood and assess where the traffic allowed for these structures to go. So what is the plan to do that? Are they going to take ped counts? Are they going to use, DOT of all people knows how to do this, but I haven't really heard very much about that. The other thing, and this is something that was raised earlier, is in dealing with the general public. In our district, we have a lot of mixed residential and commercial and restaurants. There's got to be a big effort made to educate people on just how this is going to work and who they should respond to. Even under the past schema, a lot of our residents don't know where to go to register their complaints. I hear that the Department of Health is going to be involved, obviously the DOT, there's noise. So there's got to be, some sort of, I'd like to hear from the DOT how they're going to address these issues. And then the last thing is, what is the budget? Money talks. What is the budget going to be for enforcement of all these things?
Okay, thank you, Todd. Anyone from DOT want to jump in?
So very quickly, that was a lot of very good comments. The dedicated kind of DOT open restaurant team will be able to be thinking about and reviewing more comprehensive and be able to take a more comprehensive look at kind of aggregate open restaurant applications. Very critical is also the fact that the parameters of the program will be set up in advance of people being able to apply for the program, and there will be design review in advance of restaurants being able to set up for the permanent program. We think that's going to be key to making sure that we get responsible and compliant setups, as well as kind of thoughtful at a larger scale. Again, we'll have more information on the fee structure. That's something that is still in development, as well as enforcement. Enforcement will be a huge part of the conversation as we get into DOT rulemaking next year. And Jennifer, I don't know if you want to say a few words just about points of contact for complaints and any issues related to specific dining setups.
I can share those. We've been working with the borough president as well as the community boards and elected offices. I know a lot of other stakeholders on the call here as well. So I can just look to share our main office line. There's also a contact DOT, very specific dedicated site for OR complaints. And that is in addition to residents and other local stakeholders, as well as for any restaurant owners that might have questions on some of their inspection results.
Okay, thank you, Jennifer. Thanks everyone for sticking with us. We usually try to end right on time, but there's a few more questions. So 4 more. So we're gonna, if everyone's okay with that, we're gonna finish those questions. Tracy Jackson, your next question.
Yes, hi, thank you. I'm from Assemblymember Deborah Glick's office. The Assembly member has been quite outspoken about a number of the issues that people have already raised about enforcement, the ceding of public space for a private industry. I want to go back to for a moment to the survey, which, you know, one person could sit down and fill it out 500 times, and that's seems highly problematic. But can you say a little bit more about how you're going to weigh the survey results and these public forums, you know, information that comes in through the public forums against all of the resolutions and votes that community boards have already done after a very lengthy review and input process? Can you say more about how you're weighing the public feedback you're soliciting? Thank you.
Sure, great question. So I want to very quickly, the survey is a kind of short, high-level survey that's really an initial launching point for us to collect some public sentiment and specific feedback from different viewpoints of open restaurants, operator versus member of the public. So that is just more
I'm so
of
sorry to interrupt. It's just, if the survey can be completed hundreds of times by one individual, I'm not sure how reliable that is to be used for this serious a change to the city's landscape.
So again, like I said, we see the survey really just kind of as a high level, kind of quick snapshot of what folks are feeling, especially in this early stage. It's not something that we would consider as any kind of seminal piece of kind of design direction for the program, but it's just one of the many tools. Again, we're trying to diversify our ways of reaching people and getting feedback from as many ways as possible. I want to assure.
I know we've written to the commissioner about this and are still waiting for a response. So while I've got you, and this is a really hot topic in our district specifically, but I know citywide as well, if the DOT is going to insist on using the survey to provide input for all of this, isn't there some other way to design the survey so that 1 or 2 people cannot complete it hundreds of times? That surely will skew the results. That's, you know, just some feedback that we're hearing from numerous people and that the Assembly member has raised as a concern as well.
Thank you. I can take that back to our tech team and see. Again, DOT conducts surveys all the time, so it is, you know, it's part of our process. I just want to answer the other part of your question, which is that, you know, we're going to be through our workshops soliciting some very detailed feedback. But certainly all of the resolutions and the feedback that we've gotten from the community boards over the past many, many months is part of what we are considering. And it's also part of what all of our other sister agencies are considering when they're giving DOT feedback on the program. So it is not, we're not taking a kind of single piece of information and weighing that over all of the other kind of very important public process and feedback that we've been receiving over the past many months.
Hi, Tracy, it's Ed Pinkar. I also wanted to say that we received the Assembly member's letter 2 weeks ago. We are developing a response and we'll get that over to you very shortly.
Thanks. And I just want to mention there are also questions in the chat. We will, you know, make sure that DOT has them and we can give some responses to folks when we send out the chat this week. We have 3 more questions. Quickly, DM Boyd, a question?
Hi, yes, thank you. Again, you know, many people spoke very well about the issues of this program. I just have a very specific questions. How many 311 calls does it take for DOT to respond to complaints? We are told, we understand this was, you know, ad hoc, put together quickly, but it doesn't matter how many enclosed structures are reported, how many outdoor speakers are reported. 311 and the connection between 311 and DOT seems to be not happening at all. There is absolutely no enforcement on the Lower East Side. can you please address what your response time is when you receive a 311 call? Thank you.
So that's a bit of a nuanced question, only because certain complaints again go to different agencies. If you find that you are submitting to 311 and you don't hear anything, again, please reach out directly to our Manhattan Borough Commissioner's office, and we will help make sure that the complaint gets to the right enforcement agency.
Just a quick follow-up then. If you are only budgeting 12 officers in the permanent program, how are you going to tackle upwards of 20,000 sheds to be enforced?
So very quickly, we are still working on building out the full team for the permanent program. And as you might kind of surmise, that between kind of the pandemic hopefully tapering off, between program fees, and between a new set of more robust permanent guidelines for the program, that we anticipate will change the numbers versus what is kind of our current landscape for emergency use. But again, we are going to be looking at the program holistically and working towards the staffing details, and can share those updates with you as they're developed.
Thanks, Emily. Okay, some people added, if you can put your question in the chat, that would be great. Otherwise, we have 4 more, and then I'm gonna have to cut it off. We have Lisa, E.A. Sabo, Leslie Clark, and Sherry Leon. So we're gonna cut it off after that. Lisa Kaplan, go ahead, question.
Yeah, following up on the last question in a way, it seems to me that it would be really helpful if DOT and all of the associated agencies had a public forum and a public process for outlining what the enforcement mechanisms will be and what the staffing will be, as those details are becoming more and more clear as you develop them. Has there been any thinking about having a participatory process to go through that complicated issue of what agency is in charge of what, and how it'll be enforced, and to relieve the really very deep concerns that the community has about the potential for real useful enforcement of this complicated program?
Great point and great question. And yes, as part of the public CAPA process and DOT rulemaking next year, there is an opportunity for public input, participation, review, comment.
Thank you. E.A. Sabo.
Yes, hi, Sabo. Thank you, everybody, for this meeting. My question is, well, to couch it, we have over a year left of the emergency program. We've already had many meetings. We've already had tremendous feedback from community boards and block associations and residents who are rightfully very upset about what this is doing to our neighborhoods and our homes. My question is, we have been shouting in the wind requesting a thorough environmental impact study. Now, I know you said that there was an environmental assessment done, which indicated that there was no environmental impact. We all know, everyone on this call knows that that is not true. What can we do to get over this next 12, 13 months, an actual environmental impact study done?
Thank you. Anybody from DOT?
That's something that I can't comment on at this time.
We will continue to ask. Thank you for the question, and I appreciate it. Leslie Clark.
I can just,
Leslie Clark, go ahead.
Sorry, this is Carolyn Grossman from City Planning. I just wanted to
Carolyn,
briefly respond to the question about the environmental review. Apologies, I just wanted to give just a slightly more detailed answer, which is to say, first of all, the environmental assessment is the first stage that is required when any zoning action is going before public review. And the environmental assessment statement, which is online, I would, you can find it on planning.nyc.gov or in ZAP if you're a community board member. I would encourage everybody to look at it. That report did conclude that there were no significant adverse impacts based on the proposed program. Now, I want to just stress that that's the proposed program. And as we've discussed a lot in this meeting, the proposed program is not the same as the emergency program. So, I think there is a general misconception that though we can see a lot of effects on our streets right now, that automatically assumes that an environmental impact statement is necessary. That's not accurate because the assessment is being done on a different proposed program that has all of the administrative and design rules that we're discussing today in place. So again, I would just note that to folks that I think there is a common misconception, but you can read what the conclusions of the environmental review were online. It's a public document. We can certainly, I'll see if I can find a direct link to it to share with folks. There is a pending lawsuit regarding that. So obviously, there will be a process for determining whether those conclusions were valid, but that were the conclusion of experts that we did not see those impacts based on a different condition where many of the things like the enclosures and like some of the environmental concerns were addressed. So I would just continue to point out that those are not, we are not doing an environmental assessment of the emergency program itself.
Got it. Thank you, Carolyn. That's helpful. Leslie Clark, go ahead, Leslie, and then Sherry, and then we're closing out.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, I know that we have people here from the DOT. I would like to know if the DOT will commit to restoring the 8-foot pedestrian passageway that has disappeared from our sidewalks throughout the city, and whether in the permanent program they will restore the 3-foot surface aisle that always existed before. I live in an area with very narrow sidewalks. I don't have those sidewalks anymore. They're covered with tables and chairs. Nobody from the DOT insists that those restaurants get those tables and chairs off of the pedestrian walkway. So I'd like to know, will the city of New York restore the 8-foot pedestrian sidewalk and the 3-foot service aisle that always pertained to sidewalks and sidewalk cafes in New York City? Thank you.
As we continue to develop our permanent program design guidelines, we absolutely are looking to create criteria that are based off of both historic clear path requirements, but also to some of the comments earlier, thinking through other kind of heightened demands on our sidewalks. So clear path and accessibility are a big priority for the permanent program design guidelines.
So you're not willing to commit to it?
We're still going through a robust design process. Okay. So that's something to.
To me, this means
tuned.
the sidewalk is gone. This means the pedestrian sidewalk is gone.
I just want to say that we've had presentations that we shared in briefing our commission. We can provide YouTube links to those if you'd like to go back. We did in those discussions talk about a clear path. We are holding firm with 8 feet as we move forward in the permanent program. In some cases where the traffic is even higher, it will need to be greater. So these are things that Emily was speaking to that were in place prior to the emergency program coming up, and that's something that we're going to fall back to and be rigid on as we move forward in the permanent program. Another thing is that seating will be kept against the building. Again, I'm sorry. Yes, also discussing the service aisle. There's other things that we've seen where some tables on the sidewalks are not up against the building. They're what's called the amenity lane along the curb line. That's another area where going forward, that will not be permitted and that we're keeping chairs and tables up against the building line. So, those are just a couple instances that we think will help get our sidewalks to be back to being free and clear for pedestrians, and that 8-foot being, held by business owners.
By the way, you could do this right now. DOT could do this right now. You don't need to do this in a permanent program. Thank you.
Thanks, Leslie. Okay, last question. Sherry Leon, yes.
Hi, yeah, so many questions. I've changed my mind so many times. One quick comment about what Ms. Clark said, and that this is for Eric Gregory. I second what she said. There is no reason why any of those issues that are out there on our sidewalks and streets right now couldn't be corrected and completely changed to comply with whatever permanent program you have in mind, so that they're in compliance right now or in the last 18 months. So my actual question is, I wanted to ask Ms. Marr about the environmental impact study, and just say that I also would be so glad if everyone on this call would read the statement, the public statement that has been put out regarding the environmental effects that the city thinks this program will have, which are none. We know, people who have looked at the study and the results, that, for example, noise, there's really no other than a declaration that there will be no noise effects on the residents of this city. There's really no difference between the program that was examined by the initial assessment and the program that will be going forward. The program for the last 18 months was enough evidence that you needed to see what the impacts would be. And instead of actually taking a serious study and doing that, I don't know what professionals you were referring to that had actually studied the conditions that these outdoor dining establishments have done, enacted on the noise of this city, but it really just was a declaration that there were no effects. So the distinction between the program that was examined with the environmental assessment and what is going to go forward is pretty meaningless. I would just, I respectfully, there is no misconception. I really, as just a person with average intelligence, but a lot of eyes to see what's out there, I kind of offended by the idea that you think that we have a misconception about what is in that study. Guess that wasn't a question, sorry. It was just a comment.
Thank you, sir. Okay. Thank you all. This is clearly a very controversial topic. There's a lot more public dialogue to be had. And I know our friends at City Planning and DOT heard that, and we really appreciate you being on the task force today and listening and being a part of this conversation. And I appreciate everyone who came out from all the community boards and everyone else to ask questions and let us know what you think. So we've gone a little over today, but I do want to thank everyone very much for coming. We will make sure that everyone has the chat, and that if there are unanswered questions, we'll try to get answers to them. And thank you again, and we will see you next week at 3 o'clock. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you.